So I don't have a lot of exciting slides, but I'm thrilled to be here and to be able to share some of the things that I've learned about assessment, but I also feel like hopefully I've learned so much from you, and I feel like assessment really does sit at the core of all of our innovations in a way. And as I was thinking about assessment, I was thinking, you know, in the United States, assessment often gets a really bad name. It's kind of like a dirty word. And the reason that assessment gets a bad name is because it's often associated, at least in the US, with draconian accountability measures. We're holding teachers accountable and schools accountable to student outcomes based on assessments. But I want to argue that we need to rethink assessment. And when I think about rethinking assessment, it all goes back to how do we define assessment? And I love that I'm following Mary, even though it's difficult shoes to fill. I love that she put up on a slide, we measure what we treasure. And I feel like that is the key to assessment. And thinking about assessment as just, it's about collecting data on what our goals are and how well we are reaching those goals. So as I think about that, for all of our innovations, I think that there's three basic questions that we need to answer. And that is, why do we assess? What do we assess? And how do we assess? So when I think about that first question, why do we assess? I think there's basically two reasons. The first is for summative assessment. It's what we call assessment of learning. And when we think about assessment of learning, that's what we do after learning has occurred. And we want to be able to report on and tell other folks about what a student has learned and how a student can be able to report and say, this is where I am. So those are end of the course exams or tests that teachers give. It's also portfolios. In addition, though, it is all of those standardized assessments. So it's the matriculation exam here in Finland that kids take after they're finished high school and when they're interested in applying to college. But it's also all of the standardized tests that we give in the United States at the end of third, fourth, fifth, all the way through high school. And then it's, of course, the PISA exam, too, which is intended to be a summative assessment of where kids have gone up to the point of them turning 15. But I want to argue that the real power of assessment and the reason that why we assess is not for summative assessment, but what I like to call assessment for learning, and that a formative assessment. And that is where kids articulate their goals, and we know where they want to go, and then how do we collect data that will help them figure out where they are currently, and then make a pathway to close the gap between where they are and where they want to go. So that brings me to the second question, which is, what do we assess? And I want to argue that, you know, discipline-specific assessments, they are valuable, but they're not the end-all, be-all. So yeah, we do assess math and literacy, and we assess science and history, philosophy, and we get a lot of information about what knowledge kids know, but it's also important that we assess, once again, what we treasure. And that is, if we're thinking about 21st century skills, thinking about critical thinking and problem-solving skills, creativity, collaboration, communication, and their character skills as well. And that's really hard. And I know that a lot of people come to me and are like, how do you assess that? And I certainly don't mean it as a summative assessment. I mean it as formative assessment. So how do we help kids realize if we want you to be a critical thinker and you want to be a critical thinker, what does that mean and what does it look like? So that's the goal, and then how do we close that gap? So that comes to that third question of how. How do we assess? And when I think about that, I think about it in two different ways. One is in thinking about student-engaged assessment. And that is, how do kids articulate what their goals are, and then identify what is the evidence that is going to convict me of actually moving towards my goals. And I really wanted to think about that in as creative ways as possible. And so how do we collect that kind of evidence? Which brings me to the innovation that we're being recognized for at Two Rivers, which is we're a charter school in DC that serves about 800 kids, and we're an EL education school, which means that we do projects. We're a project-based school. And what we do through those projects is get kids deeply involved in solving real-world problems. So from figuring out how to clean up the Anacostia River, which is one of our two rivers, in 4th grade, or figuring out the ethics of genetics in our 8th grade class, and how to communicate to the National Institutes of Health about how we make ethical decisions about the new CRISPR technology. And kids work collaboratively on projects, and they present their work effectively. And so I would argue that they are developing critical thinking and problem-solving skills, collaboration and communication skills all along. But then how do we assess that? And the biggest question for me is, how do we know that when they leave us, that they are going to be able to take those skills beyond the projects that they did with us? And those projects with us, frankly, are a lot of the times supported by teachers and by lots of other students around them and the work. And we really want them to know that these are thinking routines or habits of mind that they can go with beyond. And so when we think about our innovation has been basically to help name what critical thinking and problem solving looks like for students. So we create a set of rubrics that go into different kinds of dimensions like decision making, problem solving, effective reasoning. And then with those rubrics, we teach all the way through our expeditions or our projects. And then we follow that, though, with novel performance tasks. And these novel performance tasks happen after the project is done, with the intent of giving kids an opportunity to demonstrate their thinking skills beyond the original setting in which they saw them. And then going back, though, it is all about personalizing the learning for kids and letting them own those goals. And so taking that data that they did in their performance assessment and realizing this is where I am and this is where I want to go, and how do I close that gap? And so being able to use those rubrics and the information from the performance assessment to give meaningful feedback to kids so that they can apply it to the next project and the next project until they leave us. So I want to finish, though, by saying that really, as you think about whatever your innovation is, we need to engage in those three questions of why do we assess, what do we assess, and how do we assess? So starting with that first question of why do we assess, I would argue that the most important reason to assess is formative. So how do we get kids to engage in their own understanding of where their goals are and how they're going to move forward? And how do we use that data to help us chart a path towards where we want them to go? And then the second piece is what do we assess? And I would argue that it needs to go well beyond just collecting data and measuring the things that are measured on standardized assessments. So beyond the basic disciplines of math, literacy, science, but also including critical thinking, problem-solving skills, creativity, empathy, character, and those collaboration skills. And then last but not least, I would encourage us all to challenge ourselves. How do we assess? And how do we engage kids in the assessment process of really owning their goals and trying to figure out how to connect between where their goals are and where they are currently? So thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Pekka now. So.
Thank you. Is this working? Yep. Are you hearing me? Okay, great. So thank you, Jeff. I agree all what you said. And I'm a teacher, and I'm also a teacher trainer. I travel around Finland, and past 3 years I have been giving lectures only about assessment. Assessment is something, I think it's the #1 topic in Finland, what the teachers are figuring out, what we should do. And I really love working as a teacher in Finland because we have so many blind spots, and I like to try to figure it out, what we don't see, that is there, what are the blind spots that we have in the national level. And I share you one and it's about the definition of assessment, or one example. Here's one example. The aim of pupil assessment is to guide and encourage learning and to develop the pupil's capacity for self-assessment. Which one of you disagrees heavily with this? Okay, guess where I took this quote? Where is this from? Close, but not. It's actually a Finnish Basic Education Act. So our law is saying that if we are doing the assessment work, the key what we should do is to develop the pupil's capacity for self-assessment. This is actually quite old. It's from 1998. It's almost 20 years old. And what the teachers are doing, we are having exams after exam after exam. In our curriculum, it's 500 pages. It's a lot of text, no pictures. Guess how many times in Finnish curriculum is said words exam or test? How many times? Yeah, 0. So what the teachers are doing, we are having exams after exams after exams. And I've been speaking with a lot of teachers from different countries, and they are saying that they have to give exams because it's in the law or in the curriculum, and they would like to have that kind of curriculum that they would have more choices. But I can say you by experience, if your government or whoever is deciding how you should assess, if they go mental and says, okay, you don't have to assess anymore, or you don't have to give tests, what the teachers will do, they will continue doing what they have done. I try not to build a new school with a new way of assess. We have seen and heard a lot of great examples if you build the way to assess from scratch, how you can do. But what I try to do is I try to change the way the teachers assess in every school, in every classroom in Finland. So the solution needs to be really simple. It needs to look like there's almost no change at all in the way we are doing now. So small, simple solutions. I share one example, and the example is, it's not pretty, but it's something that works. So this is made with Google Sheet. I use Google Sheet because it's free and everyone can copy it, and no charge. And okay, here is one way to assess. I zoom here. Here are some learning objectives or goals I have written. This is, for example, vector calculus course, and here are some objectives. I understand the concept of a vector, or I know how to draw a vector if the length and the direction is given. I give them these objectives because this is just how it works now. I would like to have this someday that the students could decide what their goals are, but in Finland we are not there yet. This is has to be done like this. So I give them these objectives. For example, if the course is 6 weeks long, they have like 60 to 100 objectives. And then they self-evaluate or self-reflect how they feel about this. The feeling is the key. So I asked them to self-evaluate with these 5 different colors. For example, the green one means I think I can do this so well that I could teach this to my friend. I have a feeling that I could teach this to my friend. The blue one means that I think I understand this. The orange one means I feel that there is something that I understand, but I have the feeling in my gut that I don't understand it completely. The red one means I need a lot more time. The black one means I decide not to learn this at the moment. And one key is also, this is not an individual tool, it's a team tool. So we have a team of 5 students, and everyone are using the same tool. So here are name 1, name 2, so they put their names there. And when they are studying, they have this group of 5 students, they sit around the same table, and they express how I feel about these different kind of topics. And yeah, by the way, if you want to copy this and make your own version of this, there's a link. Just use it. You don't have to mention where you get this idea. And after a couple of lessons, it looked like this. So they start putting some colors, so I can see more closely how it's going on. And if I have 13 teams and 55 students, it looks like this for me. So something is happening. And what you can assess, there is only the sky's the limit, or actually your imagination is the limit. Here are some objectives. I know how to ask help when I need it. I was able to help someone else in my team. I was kind when working with someone. You can ask them to self-evaluate whatever you want. And then I have to give grades. We give grades from 4 to 10. The 10 is the best, 4 is fail. And I actually, the past 2 years, I have let the students to decide what kind of grades they should have. So I asked them give grades from different kind of things. This is, for example, English language. So they give grades themselves for work ethics or perseverance, teamwork skills, reading skills, writing English, speaking English. And then the final grade or mark. What should be put in your certificate? And the team decides these numbers with themselves. They have a discussion, are everyone feeling that this is okay for everyone? And after the team has decided these grades, then we have a discussion with me about 15 minutes if this is okay. And I have said thousands of teachers in Finland that I don't use tests for assessment. I give my students free to choice to pick what grade they want, and no one is following me at this moment. They said that they have to give tests in order to have the correct mark. We need to have tests in order to know what the students actually know and don't know. And I show you one picture. It's an illusion. In Finland, the teachers don't know how to do it. I'm actually not sure if this picture is a national secret or not, but don't take any pictures, or I have to take your cameras. But we have been studying how good we are in evaluating or assessing our students in the way we are doing. And in here you see are the marks that the teachers have gave the students after 9th grade, so after the primary school, and they are using these grades for applying to the next level for high school. So The number 10, these are the students that are the best students in Finland, and then they give the national test or standardized test to test what they really know. So every student that has the number 10, so the best, their skills are somewhere between here. And the 9, same thing, 8, 7, 6, 5. So actually we have students that has number 5, so the lowest possible number, but they are much cleverer than the students that has the best grade. And for example, if you have a grade 7 or below, you are most likely not to go to high school because you are not allowed to go. You are not clever enough. And if you have a 10, you can choose which school you want to go because you are the best. So this is what's happening right now in Finland. So I think if I let the students choose their grade, they won't do it any worse than this. So thank you.
And now we are allowing time for a short chat. Let's go a bit below 10 or whatever, but let's ask a few questions. And we've agreed is that Jeff will interview shortly Pekka, and then vice versa, and let's see what happens. So it's an experiment in the making, and if it works, it might be an innovation, but we don't know yet.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. So Pekka, one of the things that I'm fascinated by your innovation is how do you help get kids to sort of understand their goals? And I understand you guys are giving sort of targets and explaining them to them, but could you say more about how do kids really understand those goals?
Well, at this point, I think most of them don't even understand those because this is something that we started, for example, 2 years ago, and the students in Finland don't know how to self-evaluate because we haven't teach them. So we are in the beginning, and I just throw them some objectives and let's see what happens at this point. I hope in some day they can choose the objectives, and at that point they might understand those also, but we are really in the beginning.
Yeah, and I understand that you're scaling this across Finland. Could you talk a little bit about that process and how that's happening, and how you're helping other teachers across Finland do some similar practices?
Yeah, well, all the tools I try to use are free, easy to copy, and we have a lot of teachers who are trying to use some kind of same ideas, and then I hope that we share all the information and the experience. We have a Facebook group that has now like 14,000 teachers, and we share, discuss and sharing. And if I can ask you,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm interested in your two rivers assessment. What kind of things you have find out, or something that you can share for the regular schools or everywhere?
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like our assessment is really, there's some aspects that are very specific to our context, but I think what goes beyond our context is the idea that we can name what critical thinking and problem solving might look like, and create rubrics. And I feel like there's a lot of rubrics out there around critical thinking, but then how do you operationalize those in schools? And I feel like part of that is in tying it to instruction. And so one of the other key pieces that I would say are replicable at any school around the world is one is naming what those constructs are that you want to be able to assess and that you want kids to realize. And then second, we use thinking routines from Project Zero to help articulate what is the thinking and the habit of mind that we want to engender in kids. And I feel like that also is scalable. It's like, so once you know what the thing is, the goal is, then you can start to align your instruction to it. And I feel like whether that is empathy or collaboration skills, I feel like you can start to name what those things are for kids, and so that they understand them, and then you can start to align what you're doing in classrooms.
We are talking a lot about how to evaluate or assess skills. And do you have something that you can give me right now?
Yeah, sure. So we have a number of performance tasks that we've created, and you can take those right off the shelf. But and they're things like they're fairly simple, but giving kids the opportunity to sort of to problem solve and think through questions that are like, how do we improve our school cafeteria and lunchroom? And while you may not take that particular question, like the structure of the assessment is something that you could take and use right away.
Yeah. Oh, we have.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question,
30
which
seconds.
is, what do you feel like is the biggest roadblock to changing assessment practices in Finland?
It's a teacher's mindset.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
So that's why I try to invent some really easy tools to use, and then just we need to find a lot of teachers who thinks that okay, this is good. I tried this, and then we need time.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.